Hello and welcome. I'm Kimberly Ely, Patronato's Development Director. Today's Friends of Patronato lecture is a conservation update on Mission San Javier's legendary East Tower, presented by Bob Vint, who has served as Patronato's preservation architect since 1988. Bob's presentation not only shares exciting details about the second phase of work, where you can see scaffolding is now underway, it also includes a look back on the East Tower's 224-year history, dating from the time builders ended their work in 1797, leaving the East Tower unroofed and exposed to the elements. So now, let's turn to Bob Vint for his conservation update presented on March 11th, 2021.
Great to see everybody. Lots of familiar faces and old friends. So welcome everybody for the latest development. Is the PowerPoint showing to everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
East Tower update. The last time I presented this material, part of it anyway, was actually 3 years ago in the spring of 2018. And at that time I called it East Tower Story. But now it's the East Tower update, letting you know where we are and where we're going. So the focus of our current phase of work is the exterior of the East Tower. This is a detail of the plan of the mission. Here's the front archway, the West Tower, which was completed, 11, almost 12 years ago now, and the East Tower. Now, as we know, the infamous, or I should say the famous unfinished East Tower, the legendary unfinished East Tower, not only did it not have a dome added to it, it was left unstuccoed for over 100 years. This photo is pre-1887, which we know because the archway at the atrium is still standing. This arch came down and this wall came down in the earthquake, as did 6 of the, or let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 of the 7 columns that you see in this facade tumbled down when the earthquake struck May the 3rd, 1887. And here you see the rough masonry, the rough adobe brick of the East Tower, and the volutes, which are these kind of curlicue formations, were just roughed out as just kind of blocks of masonry, which we'll discover. You can see how deteriorated all the wooden elements were at that time. This is a time when the mission was about 100 years old and had been abandoned for 50 years. This is what happens when buildings are abandoned. So this is actually the beginning of the Grand John restoration. We know that because the balconies have been reconstructed. Here you see the remnants of the atrium walls, those that did not collapse in the earthquake. The walls that ran north to south withstood the earthquake because the earthquake came from the south. The walls that ran east-west just toppled over because it's like you're shaking the tablecloth, right? Everything tips over in the direction that you're shaking it. But again, the unplastered East Tower was stuccoed under Bishop Grandjohn's restoration, which was the first decade of the 20th century, 1900 and 1910. And it was the first time the mission was whitewashed altogether and uniformly finished. And that's when it took on this imagery of the white dove of the desert. Prior to that, it was sort of the gray dove. But, you know, doves are gray, right? Now we have the white dove, and it's the inheritance of Bishop Grandjohn. Here you see the upper part of the volutes has not yet been stuccoed, and the balustrades are being repaired. Here's a view from, this is around the time, this is from Bunny's book. This is a photo by Ed McCain. And it's looking down on the 2 towers, the west and the east. You see the east, again, being unroofed, exposed to the weather, and also unplastered for the first century. We do anticipate that there will be deteriorated brick beneath the cement plasters that were applied in the 50s. Now, the work that has gone on prior to this, up until 2018, included some stabilization of the room adjacent to the tower. Here's the tower. And these are mud adobe walls in what's now the museum. In fact, we were calling this the East Museum Room because it was the first room of the museum east of the tower. And we restructured the roof there and put in a bond beam to stabilize it against earthquakes. It also helps support the church in the event of an earthquake and provide support for scaffolding. Other areas that were completed in the first phase of work on the East Tower, the most important probably was the underpinning of the foundation. If you look at the mission from the south, you will see that actually the 2 towers are not plumb. The East Tower is slightly out of plumb. And once I pointed that out to Bunny Fontana, he never forgave me because he said, now I'll always see it that way. You can't approach it from the south without seeing that. So under the guidance of our geotech, Ralph Pattison, we underpinned the foundation down to bedrock, which is 2 to 3 feet below grade. And what's interesting is in between the foundations, which were laid in the soil, and the bedrock, there's this kind of flour-like soil that was scraped out and substituted with lime and crushed rock. So we have a good solid footing, earthquake resistant. It's one of the best things you can do to resist earthquakes is have a good foundation. We've also refinished areas of the roof that you see shaded here in a gray tone, essentially above the roof of the museum. This is the first museum room with 3-foot thick adobe walls. There's a propped up roof over the old original ceiling. So as high as a mason could reach from the roof has been repaired and refinished. On the north wall of the East Tower, we're into what is known as the chapter room, 3 vaults where the Franciscan chapter would meet periodically. And that room has been completed from the foundation up to the first level of the cornice. Now this balustrade requires reconstruction. It was concrete and it had worked loose and it was removed in the first phase and will be reconstructed in the second phase out of brick and lime with fiberglass reinforcing against earthquakes. So we're using a mix of traditional materials and some modern materials that have proven themselves to be effective. Also completed in the first phase was the interior of the first floor of the East Tower. This drawing here on the right hand is a cross section from east to west through the tower, showing the first floor room. There's the second floor room that opens onto the choir loft, and then what we were calling the first, second, and third tiers of the tower. Also in this cross section, you see the stairway that's wending its way up to the roof, which is actually a tunnel built into the wall. You've got masonry on either side of you, and you're walking up inside this tunnel that leads you to the roof. So the oldest stair in Tucson and still the best. Details of the foundation underpinning. The Historic Survey back in 1940 had made an assumption that the walls were brick all the way through, and that the foundation was laid on large ashlar stone blocks. However, what we found is that, in fact, it's a lot less formal than that. For one thing, the walls are actually a brick veneer with a stone core. And this was found as we worked on the other walls of the building. Beneath cement plaster, oftentimes the soft adobe was powdered to the point where if you scrape it down to a depth of 4 inches, we hit rock. And this happened time and again. We finally realized, oh, the building is actually rock with a brick veneer. The way it worked was the brick was laid up essentially as formwork to hold the stone and the lime mortar while it set. So they'd build up, say, 2 feet of wall, fill it and compact it, wait for it to cure, lay up another 2 feet of wall, again, repeat that procedure. And then these bricks that are deeper into the wall acted as a tie course so that the stone above would hold them down. And this way they essentially built a concrete wall, primitive concrete of lime and volcanic rock, and left the brick in place, which was the formwork for the concrete. And then that also provided a smooth surface for plastering and painting. And when I figured this out actually back in the mid-90s, and I mentioned it to one of the Italian restorers, Vincenzo Centani, who, when I said, oh, this is actually a stone core to the wall, he says, oh, well, that's normal. That's how we build. It's a Roman system. This is how the Romans built the Colosseum, for example. Roman concrete work was a brick veneer, and then they filled the hollow with stone. So this is a photo from this past Tuesday, the 9th of March. The scaffold is going vertical after all this anticipation that we've had. In the photo is Eric Means, who is our chosen contractor, and we're analyzing the stability of the scaffolding against winds, as it'll be up for the better part of a year, we expect. We've brought in an engineer to analyze the wind load, and Eric submitted a diagram, shop drawing we would describe it as, showing what he proposes to lay out as a scaffold. The engineer is going to evaluate it. But here you see all the elements of the scaffold starting to go up. And I learned actually on this visit last Tuesday that one of Eric's crew, Jarvis Swan, is from the village of Bach. He's worked with Eric since 1996 when Eric built the Stone Elder Center just west of the mission. And he's a guy from the district. And I was talking to him as the meeting broke up, and he saw on the, I'm sorry, let me back up here, on the fencing where Chuck had lined up the illustrative panels explaining the history. There's a picture that Bill Steen took. It was in the New York Times article. there's a dog in the aisle of the church. And Jarvis says, "Hey, that's my dog in the picture. He always follows me and my wife to church." So we've got a guy who's right from there, who's an essential member of the crew. Up on the top of, this is on the second tier, we have Eric Means talking with Alan Sacra. Alan Sacra is the structural engineer who's going to analyze the tower and advise us on resisting wind load. Looking down from above, you can see the conditions that we're facing in terms of cement plaster and deterioration and weathering. Here's looking straight down onto the roof of the museum room, which will have to bear some load for the scaffold. And again, this is a chronic condition, fractured cement plaster. Wherever it is detached and hollow behind, it'll be removed and the brick beneath repaired, and then it'll be replastered with lime and sand and cactus emulsion. And this is sort of a closing picture, just a reminder of the length of time our mission has been admired. This book was published just over a century ago, 1919, by Prentice Dewell, who was an art historian from Harvard, who wrote a book, Mission Architecture as Exemplified at Saint Javier. And on the right, there's a picture of him in Egypt, checking out the early Egyptian art. He was an expert in all sorts of art. But I guess it's just kind of lending perspective to the fact that our little mission has attracted interest from around the world for centuries. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you for joining us for today's Friends of Patronato lecture. Be sure to visit our website for more details on Patronato's work. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing to Patronato's YouTube channel, following us on Facebook and Instagram as well. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you.